Being homeless is a very, very sad thing, and the worst thing about it is that you can't get food. But most of the supermarkets will lock all of the bins that they throw the food in. So it's very difficult for people to survive.
My name is Firsov. I'm living in Southwark and I'm 25 years old. I was born in Moscow in 1985. My parents emigrated in 1991. They were our famous musicians. We only had 4 suitcases and £1,000 when we arrived, and my parents earned only that which they needed. We moved around a lot and we saved everything that we could. The food was not thrown in the bin. In the Soviet Union, when I was a very young child, there was a very large problem with food shortages, and there was very basic food. So the idea of throwing away tons of food is unspeakable. In Britain, there's statistically 13 million people in the poverty category, and 4 million people live in what's called food poverty. There are a lot of people without money or with very little money that can't afford the food, and it's going into landfill when they could either get it cheaper or the supermarkets could give it to them. When I bought a rickshaw in January this year, I began to ride around Soho, and when I was going home, I'd find a lot of food on the way in bin bags. It became a regular thing for me to find the food and give it to other people.
I've found that supermarkets and cafes put pretty much all of their unsold food in bins every night, even though most of this food is still in its packaging. I can't understand why they would do this, when there are homeless people who would gladly receive it. It seems wasteful, illogical and cruel. And this isn't just an isolated tale. 11.3 million tonnes of food end up in bins in the UK every year. That amounts to an estimated £17 billion worth of food waste.
So why is it that perfectly edible food ends up in bins every night? And why am I not supposed to hand it out to homeless people and people who can't afford to pay for it?
Surely it's better for it to be eaten than for it to end up in landfill. The Manor Centre is a homeless shelter near me that works with local eateries to redistribute their waste food at the end of the day to the homeless. But how big an impact does this initiative have?
The centre has grown. Gradually it got bigger and extended the hours from 5 days to 7 days. So then we started seeing bigger numbers, 200 a day for 7 days. The harvest time we get 800 trays of food, which is a massive amount of food really.
How many people roughly do you cater for?
200 a day, and sometimes it goes over, it goes up to the 300 mark.
The founder of the food redistribution programme at the Manor Centre is Father Michael, a Catholic priest who's established a mutually beneficial link between surplus food and hungry homeless people.
I know there's no lack of food in central London. The homeless people themselves, some of those who've travelled will say that nobody on the streets anyway needs to go hungry. There are 2 shops that I go to on a Saturday afternoon who specifically clear their shelves for the Manor Centre. I think that a lot of places, if they had the opportunity and there was the need, would be very generous.
If you were also to tap into large supermarkets and large suppliers, would there be too much food for the homeless?
Yes, I'm sure there would be. There's more than enough food thrown away than could possibly be eaten by everybody who needs it.
We think the council have actually had this sentiment that if the homeless are given food, then they can be encouraged to be homeless.
I've heard that argument. It seems to me particularly cynical. Similarly, the statistics that the Manor Centre keep on supplying to the local council don't square with the local council's statistics.
The Manor Centre works because of Father Michael and his team's commitment to redistributing waste food to hungry recipients. But I don't think society can rely on the goodwill of a few to fix this national problem. To find out what's being done on a bigger scale, I'm spending the day at FareShare, a charity that redistributes surplus food from supermarkets to homeless shelters at a national level. Basically, FareShare does what I do on my rickshaw, but on a larger scale.
Well, we've grown an awful lot over the last year. We're now delivering 7.4 million meals a year, feeding about 29,000 people a day, but we're actually capturing at this moment in time about 1%, we believe, of what's actually edible out there. Most of the food that we get is coming from the manufacturing, and that's where the majority of the food waste is. 2.6 million tonnes of food every year is destroyed from the manufacturing process, and then there's about 300,000 tonnes in the retailers. Food companies are massively efficient. They make really good profits. Their waste figures are very, very low. So they're very efficient at selling things, and when they can't sell it, they're very efficient at destroying it. To destroy a pallet of food costs more than to get it to FareShare and we get it to people in the community. It is actually a cheaper solution. Retailers, on the whole, all of them support what we do, but only one retailer, and that's Sainsbury's, has signed up to our commitment and our mantra. We have got the likes of Morrison's and Asda now saying, yes, we recognise that we have some waste in our supply chain, but it's been really hard getting them to actually step up to the plate and get involved.
What can DEFRA do to make the whole system more efficient?
Maybe legislation's the answer. First of all, let's ban good quality food going to landfill.
Working at FareShare, I'm encouraged that at least I'm not the only one worrying about supermarket food being wasted or going to landfill. I tried to get interviews with almost every supermarket in the UK to find out why they're not signing up to FareShare, even though they could get rid of their food waste problem. But only Sainsbury's, who coincidentally do work with FareShare, will give me an interview. Fancy that. What does Sainsbury's do about the food that isn't purchased?
First of all, we reduce the amount of food waste that we create before it becomes waste by good forecasting of products, ensuring that what we put on the shelf is what our customers want. Once the food is no longer on the shelf to sell, we then partner with charities such as FareShare. In addition to partnering with FareShare, we also partner locally with local charities.
It's very clear that there is an amount of food that goes into landfill. Could you say something about the amount and how the company is dealing with that?
But no food waste is going into landfill.
Okay, that's very encouraging. I'm very pleased to hear that.
Well, we're very proud about it.
All right, I admit it, Sainsbury's is pretty impressive with its relationship with FareShare. And maybe, just maybe, supermarkets aren't the only bad guys here. But why am I still finding so much food waste in supermarket bins every night?
Food products have best befores and use by dates for a good reason, and if there's a risk of any kind of health implications, that is paramount. Those retailers need to be very, very responsible in the food that they distribute to the population.
But are supermarkets really concerned that simple things like bread produced in the morning that's going in the bin in the evening is going to poison somebody? And is that the reason why there's sort of big bags of bread thrown out every day?
With best befores, and it would be a best before date on bread rather than the use by, the concern clearly isn't about any food safety issues towards the end of that day. The issue is about quality. You go into the shop, you buy something, you want it to be fresh, you want it to be quality. The challenge that you have is between sustainability and brand and competitiveness.
When we went with FareShare to the back of the supermarket, there was a lot of food that hadn't been out of date, which they were giving out, but certainly an unmanageable amount for FareShare's scale. There's still a huge amount of food that they can't pick up.
The statistics are that there's about 1.6 million tonnes of food waste comes out the back of the supermarket, and 8.3 million tonnes come out of the home. So far greater waste in the home than in the supermarket.
Hang on a second, did Bob just say that household waste is greater than retail waste? And before that, I'm sure I heard Tony say that manufacturing companies produce more food waste than supermarkets.
2.6 million tonnes of food every year is destroyed from the manufacturing process, and then there's about 300,000 tonnes in the retailers.
This changes everything.
Although supermarkets are generating food waste, they're also admitting that they have a food waste problem, and they're slowly and reluctantly dealing with it in a way that benefits our society and the environment.
But what we at home haven't realised is that supermarkets aren't the real culprits here. Along with food manufacturers, we are the real problem. With our demand for high quality, low cost food, we consumers drive supermarkets to overstock, which drives manufacturers to overproduce. The supermarkets then try and get us to buy all this food with special offers, So we end up with too much food in the fridge, and that goes straight into our dustbins, which, you know what, it ends up in landfill. So we are the real problem here, and although the government has been addressing household food waste in recent years, we will need a dramatic shift in our attitudes towards food before we see any changes.
4/10 of all the stuff that people throw away in the landfill site is food. Complete, scandalous, unacceptable waste.
There's about 4 million people that have food poverty. What can the government do to help to bring food waste to them rather than into the landfill?
The first big issue is that most food is now labelled with a sort of expiry date. We can't be silly about these things. We've got to make sure that people understand that food is often perfectly okay the day after it was wrapped to make a sandwich.
It's all very well for Simon Hughes to say the government must take the lead. But if this coalition government truly believes what it says about giving power to the individual, then it has to start incentivising us to take control of our personal food waste once and for all.
So I've been completely changing the way that I throw away my food because 6 months ago my council gave me one of these, which is a food caddy. So all of my waste food goes in here, and then the contents of this little bin here goes into this massive one here, and then that goes outside of my doorstep once a week and they take it away. And what I've really found is that it's changed the way I've bought things, because I used to buy loads and I used to throw away loads and I used to cook loads, and now seeing how much waste I produce, I just had no idea. So now I'm producing a lot less waste.
Well, ideally you don't want organic waste going into landfill if you can avoid it, but you know that's difficult. So you do come right back to encouraging people to buy just what they need and encouraging retailers to sell in a format where they can buy just what they need.
We have got the likes of Morrison's and Asda now saying, yes, we recognise that we have some waste in our supply chain, but it's been really hard getting them to actually step up to the plate and get involved.
Even if your council hasn't joined the food recycling scheme, it's very easy for you to start separating your food waste from other household waste. Just doing that will make you realise how much food you waste, and will hopefully get you to start thinking about how to reduce that waste. Do it now before it's too late.